This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome back, everybody, to the X-Cast. As ever, the truth is in here. And welcome back to Fight the Future Minute. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and this is our coverage of minute 107 of the film, which begins at the 1 hour 46 minute mark as Scully begins to embrace Mulder. And this minute ends with the end of this sequence. It fades to black right as this minute ends. And to discuss this minute, Marlene Stemme is with me again. Hey, Marlene.
Hey, Carl. Good to be back.
Yeah, good to talk to you again. I just wanted to say, first of all, I mean, the main thing I like about this minute is I like the idea that Mulder was kind of running on empty. You know, he'd do everything he possibly could to get Scully back, to rescue her. And then he's kind of physically spent. And I like that. I like the fact that, like I said, there's this role reversal, I think I mentioned in the last minute, where, you know, he's now, like, lost consciousness. But yeah, I just like that idea that he's kind of expended everything he's got. So yeah, I think that's a nice idea.
I do too. And I think it's a nice idea. He's expended all that he has, but he's not passing out. You know, I mean, he's, like you said in the last minute, he's sort of happy and has a sense of joy. It's not that he's like, oh God, thank heavens that's over. Like, he puts his face down, you know. He's really just looks delighted, and it's a good moment. And it's a good, I don't say it's a good attitude for him, because that sounds, you know, far less important, I think, than what it is. But I like that he, like, happily passes out rather than just, like, drops from exhaustion, you know?
Yeah, it's always the best way to kind of fall into sleep or unconsciousness, I think, is happily. What did you think about this minute overall, then? So I guess in sum, they kind of huddle, Scully huddles with Mulder, and then we get this aerial shot, don't we, where it kind of pulls out away from them. Yeah. And just emphasises their position in this kind, you know, their isolated position in this landscape. So yeah, what did you think?
I mean, I think it's a great minute. You know, I mean, it's a minute of not much happening, but there's a lot of feeling in it. There's a lot of sort of expanse. And then I think you get kind of like a reckoning of what's happened. And then just, you know, I mean, we know what they've gone through, obviously, but I think that in particular, I think I mentioned in the last minute or the one before that, I can't remember which now, that's, I don't think Scully, I mean, she couldn't have been that aware of her surroundings. I mean, I think she knew she needed to get out of the cryo. Like, she's just trying to get away, and she knows that Mulder's there, but I don't think that she knows a lot of really, like, what's going on other than what's happening in that very moment. And so in this minute, you know, as soon as Mulder passes out, that's kind of like right after she has come to. And so she kind of gathers him in her arms, and she's, like, you know, flipping him over and holding him. And it's, I hate to say it's very sweet, because I don't mean it in a saccharine way, but it is a very tender moment. And I think it's like she's kind of realized what's happened, and maybe has, like, a moment to understand where they are, what he's done, you know, and so forth. And I think that's probably, like, that, you can see that hitting her, but yet she's being emotional, like, in Scully's way of being that way, you know. And I think that it's momentous, but it's in that moment that she's sort of understanding everything, I think. But I noticed in the midst of this that, because Mulder's arm is kind of flung out, and I remember thinking, like, while I'm sort of having that moment with him, I wish his hand wasn't lying exposed on the ice like that, you know. Yeah. No, that's probably immaterial, but it was, like, a little detail. But it just, like you said, it shows, like, how spent he is, that he's just absolutely loose. So.
Yeah, now what do you think about, it's interesting that you mentioned there that, yeah, it's a nice tender moment, and I agree. And on the commentary track, Frank Spotnitz said that this moment was pretty romantic, and Chris Carter said, yeah. So, do you see it in those terms?
I don't know. It depends on what they mean by it, I guess. I don't want to overanalyze it too much, but it depends on what Frank Spotnitz means by that. I do think it's a love story. I think it's romantic in the grander sense of romantic. One thing that I like about, like, this whole section of the film, and this part in particular, is that to me it seems more more them than some other aspects of the film where it's them showing the characters to the audience. This is sort of just them as I guess like I think of them being. So I don't really see it as a romantic love story, like in a relationship or sexual sense or anything like that. Yeah. I'm probably in the minority. Certainly in these days, I'm in the minority in that regard. At the time of the movie, however, I don't know that I really was, but I don't know. I mean, I can see them being sentimental about it being romantic, but I don't think it's romantic like typical falling in love romantic, if that makes sense. But I do think it's a love story, and I think you see that at that moment. Like I said, though, I just don't think it's like what you usually see as a love story.
Yeah. Well, romanticism, as I understand it, can be about valuing emotion. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't necessarily have to define it in the way we first think of when you hear the term. I think it can be about imagination and, you know, expression of emotion. So, and I think someone like Chris Carter, I get the sense he's kind of interested in those ideas. You know, I know he gets kind of pilloried for some of his comments in interviews, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch to think that he might think of romanticism as being like that, you know, being about that.
That's what I think. And I think the times that he's talked about it as, like, of Mulder and Scully as a marriage of true minds or something of that sort are the times that really, like, resonate with me. And I think that that's ultimately what he was going for or what he discovered, you know. Yeah. So, and that's kind of how I think of, like, conversational them. And then this, again, is more, I mean, it's more dramatic than what normally happens to them. So I think that they have that moment of, like, her realizing what he's done. And I wouldn't say realizing what he means to her, because I think she knows that, but it's just like, it's a more physical expression of that because of the physicality of their surroundings, you know. And you see, I think that also the other side of that, the other part of it that's romantic is that you know, as the camera is pulling away, you have that perspective of these two little people together in this huge and stark natural environment. And they're as it pulls further away, you see how close they are to the precipice of that great big hole. And that was made by, you know, it's interesting too, though, to me, that was made by the escape of this, like, man-made technological, you know, experiment from which they've escaped. So there are all these things going on, and yet it's, like, really simple that it's the two of them together. And then, like, this whole big world that's not quite as threatening anymore because of what they've done, but it's still the contrast of that too. And I think that that's romantic.
Yeah, I do too. I like that. I think the romantic kind of movement, I think one of their ideas was like the idea of sublimity, like, you know, the fact that you can get the mixture in nature of, like, awe and terror. And I think you get that quite often in the X-Files, I think, and you get it particularly I think in this kind of sequence, it's relevant too, just the scale of it, you know. And I think that's why this shot is an effective one, that their place in the landscape is put into some context for us. So I like it. That's interesting too, because I think, and I'm kind of going back a long time and things that I used to study and read, but it's because there's a spiritual aspect to that as well. Because, like, in the sublimity, like being awe and terror, there are a lot of, you know, descriptions of, I guess, like, religious or spiritual experience that are like awe and terror and a sense of joy as well. So there are all of those things in this, you know, they talk about the experience of the numinous, having all of those factors, like sort of like this full emotional experience. And I do think that there's a sense, like, embodied in Mulder and Scully, that that's what they've gone through. You know, you see all of those things in them. Yeah, I think so. I think my favourite sublime moment in the X-Files is the abductions, or the UFO sequence in the Red and the Black. That Scully's memory recovers.
Oh, interesting.
I think you get the awe there as well.
Yes.
And it's very terrifying as well. So I think that's always been one I appreciated. Just on this particular minute, Chris Carter talked a bit on the commentary about having to watch these shots over and over again. And I guess we kind of talked a bit about the actors having to perform certain things over and over again. But I think just the level of kind of special effects, computer-generated imagery, that kind of thing, and a lot of kind of just repetitive viewing. And that's interesting to me, that it's these kind of are the parts of the movie that, you know, that's particularly relevant for. That kind of painstaking attention to detail, I suppose. I don't know. Did you have anything about the production of this minute, Marlene, that you have read in the book?
The only thing really is that, you know, the sort of the filming, I guess, of the aspects of it that are the large scale was, I'm sure, done when they were like on location in Antarctica filming.
Yeah.
And then it's combined, or I guess edited together with the composites of David and Gillian as Mulder and Scully, like on the set enacting this part. But it kind of, you know, I mean, they have to go back and forth and combine that. And I think it works because, like we were talking about, I think you get the sense of like that very intimate, you know, moment going on between them, but in the midst of this like large scale thing. So I think that to me that really works, combining those two things that happened very different places at very different times, you know, with different production concerns and all of that. But it works really well once it's put together.
I think the idea that it's an intimate moment between the two of them, which it is, and that's very important, I think, to making this whole thing work, because the risk, I think, of blowing up taking an alien story, blowing it up to big screen scale, is that you lose some of that. You maybe can do an alien invasion story or something on the big screen, but you need to keep it grounded in those characters, don't you? Or what's the point, I suppose?
That's why, to me, and again, like why that whole sequence at the end is my favorite part, is because I think that it's done the most genuinely. I mean, again, I don't mean to criticize the rest of the movie, because it all goes toward that, you know. So, but I like the way that kind of comes together, and that you have that moment that's like sort of the just between the characters, but in the midst of everything, if that makes sense.
Could you give us maybe one or two examples of where it's less genuine then, just so we know exactly what you mean? Like, because you talked about how at other times, I don't know, the exposition or presenting the characters to the audience, what are a couple of particular moments where you're thinking about that?
I guess earlier on when they're speaking to each other, it doesn't sound the way that they speak to each other on the show, because it's more they're telling each other who they are, even though it's, you know, it's banter and it's fun, but it just doesn't seem as natural or as smooth to me, I guess. And I know it's the beginning of the movie, and they're, you know, like when they're on the rooftop, let's say. Okay. And it's enjoyable, it's fun to watch, but I don't feel quite like I'm watching the Mulder and Scully that I was accustomed to watching on the show. And I know that's because they're kind of pulling you viewers into the movie, and we go along, you know, like with them through the movie. But that, even the hallway scene, I would say it's more like openly emotional and emotive, and it's intimate. But to me, it just doesn't, I don't want to criticize it because I really do like it, and I know that people love that scene. But to me, it does not have that same intimacy and the solid personal sense between them that we see in this last scene, even though they're not really speaking and they're just sitting on the ice and she's holding him. Yeah. That to me is more like unifying than the scene in the hallway when they're talking to each other, because I don't know. I'm not explaining it very well. To go find all my notes on that. But what were you going to say?
I mean, I was wondering if you were thinking of scenes like Mulder pouring his heart out to the barmaid, where that seems like a way to kind of crowbar in who this guy is and what the context is.
Spooky Mulder, and he spent, that, or Scully saying that she left behind a career in medicine and so forth. Like those things too, you know. Yeah, so to me, like the heart of it is like these moments on the ice. Yeah, no,
I think it comes to this whole sequence comes to a satisfying conclusion, I think, on various levels, like, you know, like technologically and in the character sense too.
I would have been happy. I don't know what our listeners or what you think of this. I would have been happy had the movie gone on, because they go to the OPR hearing next, and then they go to the scene of Mulder and Scully. Like, there's several other scenes, and I know that's necessary, like, for the sort of conclusion of the movie and the X-Files being reopened. Not to give a spoiler alert for everybody else's minutes, but I would have been happy if this had been the final image that we saw of Mulder and Scully in the film.
Yeah.
Although we don't want to leave them there, but I don't think anyone is going to expect that they were left on the ice. I don't know. What do you think of that?
I think I quite like the idea, to be honest. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I just wonder, I suppose you shouldn't assume that the audience will come to the wrong conclusion, but would people have taken, I suppose it's how it's done, but would people have taken that as kind of a cliffhanger of sorts, like, let's tune in for season 6 episode 1 and find out how they go back from Antarctica? I don't know.
Because to me, it's like they're together, they're unified. Granted, Mulder is unconscious, but they're together in the end on the ice, and so I feel comfortable with that, even not knowing how they get back, you know.
And of course, that becomes a part of the show, doesn't it? In the episode alone, they kind of discuss that as, with Agent Harrison or what she's called.
Yeah, it's one of those backstory things.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I can run through a couple more things about snow, because we discovered in the last minute that snow is not white. I can also tell you that you must be careful if you're ever tempted to refer to a snowstorm as a blizzard. Snowfalls must meet a strict set of stipulations to be considered a blizzard. Visibility must be below 200 metres, while the wind has to reach speeds of around 30 miles an hour. So I'm suitably kind of informed now.
Technical, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Don't think for a second that we are the only mammals to enjoy a good snowball fight, because monkeys love snow too. So there were some Japanese monkeys who've been observed making and playing with balls of snow. They appear to enjoy stealing each other's snowballs and then battling to retrieve them. I mean, I need to get on YouTube or something and see if there's some video of this.
I can see it in my mind as you're talking.
I like that idea. Too much snow isn't good for you. Okay, so spend too much time on the slopes and you could suffer from piblokto, or Arctic hysteria, a disorder affecting Inuit people living within the Arctic Circle. Symptoms include meaningless verbal repetition or performing irrational or dangerous acts, followed by amnesia of the event. Vitamin A toxicity is thought to be one source of the disorder, though in recent years researchers have questioned whether the illness, thought to be based on as little as 8 cases, actually exists at all. I don't know, meaningless verbal repetition. Maybe I'm suffering from this. I don't know.
want to say I've heard of that. Of Arctic hysteria, is that what it was called?
Yeah.
I used to read a lot about like interesting, like culturally based or biased, I guess, psychological disorders. That sounds familiar, but I don't know. It's been a long time.
I really like this next one. A yodel won't cause an avalanche. So there are a number of factors that can trigger an avalanche, but noise is not one of them. Weight is a much more important contributor. A sudden deluge of snow, an increase in wind speed, or even the overzealous footstep of a skier can trigger a sudden deadly cascade, but a loud burst of terrible singing won't have much of an effect.
It's a relief.
It's a relief for people like myself who like to burst into song at inappropriate times.
Right.
And the final one, so snow warms you up. So because snow is comprised of 90 to 95% trapped air, it means it's a great insulator. This is the reason many animals burrow deep into the snow during winter in order to hibernate. It's also the reason that igloos that use only body heat to warm them can be 100 degrees warmer inside than outside. I mean, that makes complete sense when you think of it. It's one of those where when you say the fact, first of all, it maybe sounds a bit counterintuitive, but it makes total sense to me. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, unless Marlene has anything else you want to discuss about snow, we can kind of wrap up there, I think.
No, I enjoyed seeing as much of it as we did in the movie. I think that it was, well used and interesting facts that you've given us about it. Don't have anything else on snow.
I do like the contrast. I suppose it's earlier in the movie, but the contrast from 35,000 BC Texas to, modern day Texas and it's baking hot. I mean, it's kind of a simple kind of dichotomy, but it's kind of fun. But yeah, it's over to Tony Black and Caredwen Foley, I think, for the next few minutes. Well, I suppose that means chronologically, Marlene, this must be your last Fight the Future minute, because we're rapidly approaching the end here. I don't know, is there anything you want to say as kind of a final summation on the film?
I've learned a lot more doing these minutes. I've paid attention to details because in the minutes that I've done, both as a host and then as a guest with you, there are things that I've paid attention to because the scenes are so sparing in terms of content that would normally be stuff to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's stuff that I love, like the Mulder running in the snow earlier on, and then the long corridors of the rescue sequence, and like the moments that he's spending with Scully when he's rescuing her, and then them running on, like all of that. Like I said many times, my favorite part of the movie, but it's not something that by itself generates a lot of obvious conversation. But then there were bits within that I think that I overlooked because I was so absorbed in their plight. Yeah. And I didn't necessarily pay attention to some of the little plot details and nuances that were thrown in. Some things like inside the ship and, so forth, and some of the things that the other characters were doing. And also, again, with like the ship having that many people that have been abducted on it. And we see a lot of them, but then, it's just, like layer after layer of those people that have to have come from somewhere. And that's not the point of the movie, but it's something that's thrown in there, I think, that makes it, like, that's the larger human scale. And we're kind of more interested, I think, and rightfully so, in the smaller human scale of Mulder and Scully to a degree, but that's a consideration that he has, obviously, and then it's something that's just another layer of it to pay attention to. So I think I've seen more, layers of the movie than I would have otherwise seen had I not been so focused to come up with discussion points for it. So that's been a really fortunate thing. Yeah,
it's been a real fun challenge for the hosts of these podcasts, I think, of like, what are we going to talk about? What exactly are we going to talk about here? It's kind of a nice challenge, kind of problem solving,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've enjoyed that. So yeah, I'll be back with Tony and Sarah, hopefully for the final few minutes of Fight the Future Minute. But as I say, Tony and Caredwen are taking over on the next minute. So until then, listeners, remember, as always, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Life's milestones.
Whenever it was that there was that census where there was the campaign to try and get everybody to say that their religion was Jedi.
Oh, I remember it well. I think I did put Jedi, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I was adamant that I really wanted to put that down because it aligns a lot more with my beliefs than anything else. Star Wars has always been there for me. But yeah, that's when my mum was saying, no, we had you christened, and I ended up losing that one. And then when I lived on my own for a later census, I just, by that point, just put non-religious.
I'm in a band podcast.
Flaming Lips did a gig and they were all in bubbles. So the whole band, them big bubbles you get that you can play football in? The whole band were in them and all the people in the crowd were in one of them.
I'd go to the gig with a pin and fucking ruin everyone's evening.
You need a big pin.
Then you have to get out of your bubble first with your pin. They're going to see you.
You have a bubble with a pin on it. Or what? You're like a sea urchin, just going around causing chaos.
Rolling around.
Could you have a fag enough?
I suppose you could get your own bubble, innit?
Frame to frame.
So Sean, have you got anything further you wanted to say on the two films that we've looked at this week?
I think they're both overlooked gems, and anyone who hasn't seen them needs to go and check them out pronto. Enough said.
I agree with you. We could have also called the theme for this week Nerdy White Guy Tries to Find Love.
But are you having a go at me there?
No, I'm just saying...
Because I bore my heart when talking about the way back. I thought you were having a pop at me there.
No, absolutely not. I'm just saying that that's what we could have called the theme for this week.
I mean, we could have done. It could have been like, podcaster recalls painful memory of riding bike in front of girl.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.